The World Health Organization raised now the pandemic alert for swine flu to the second highest level, level 5. Right now, Mexico has implemented quarantines and world leaders issuing travel warnings. But, of course, it could get worse.
That's right. If it becomes a pandemic, you could lose some simple rights like going to the movies. Fox News legal analyst Peter Johnson Jr. joins us live here as well. Peter, last night when the President of the United States was talking, it sounded like in his remarks, he was talking about the possibility that parents should get ready to come up with a contingency plan in case your child's school closes.
You're exactly right. And that's really been the first national mention of that issue. And I think it's important that we don't scare people. And I think an effort's been made here not to scare anyone. But people and our government have to start thinking about how, if this actually becomes a pandemic, how it's going to affect our daily life and our rights. What is a quarantine? Who decides who goes into a quarantine?
Right.
What is isolation? Who decides who gets into isolation? If I want to get out of a quarantine or an isolation, do I have the ability to go to a court and get out? Will the government say to me, you must get a vaccination if one is developed?
Right.
If I don't get a vaccination, will I be quarantined? If I'm a healthcare provider, if I don't show up for work at a hospital, will I be jailed? Will I lose my license?
We thought it was simple. Either you were going to get sick or you weren't going to get sick.
It's not simple. And we as a society, the freest society in the world, have to think about the balancing between saving our lives if this pandemic comes true and the loss of liberty and the loss of rights as Americans. I think as Americans, in order to stay alive, in order to preserve our way of life, people are willing to give up and to make sacrifices. But at the same time, there needs to be an orderly discussion of what the rights are of the American people when this happens. And there's a lot of modeling that says it doesn't happen at all.
Okay, so let's look at some of the examples. We were talking about closing schools, which I'm sure people would understand. Closing the border to Mexico. Stop us from gathering in public spaces. We mentioned movie theaters off
the top. There goes freedom to assemble.
I can think of a lot of other things like church, maybe going to the mall.
Well, what about legislatures? What about the U.S. Congress? What about courts of law? What about not impaneling juries because we don't want to have public assemblies? I spoke to about an hour last night to Dr. Mark Siegel, who's an expert on the flu, and he's written a book on it. In fact, he was on our show about it. Yeah, he's a contributor here at Fox News, and he pointed out to me, he said, listen, we can't be panicking at this time. We have examples, when you go back to the 1918 flu, and there was a second wave. Well, the problem about the 1918 flu was that doctors thought it was a bacteria. We didn't know it was a virus. We have the capacity now to create potentially a vaccine for the fall that contains this strain of virus.
That's exactly
and so that's a big difference. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about how the legal landscape is going to be changing. Our governors have to be looking at this. Our president has to be looking at this. Our state legislature has to be looking at this. And this is the time for the ACLU to act, not to detain Americans as war criminals, but to ensure that all Americans' rights are preserved.
Excellent point.
Very interesting points. I hadn't thought about all that stuff. Thanks, Peter.
Unfortunately.
Plus a possibility of martial law, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Down the road, not going there.
It's coming out this month.